They they did a mud flood. They did it. They did some plagues. They did it to the Chinese with opium. They did it to the Australians. They did it to the American Indians with smallpox.
Yep.
They just go into a country, plague the whole place out, and then take over their buildings. New York was already there for thousands of years. San Francisco was there for thousands of years. Los Angeles was there for thousands of years. They were built by the indigenous people who were black and Indians as well. The black people, they weren't brought over by slaves. They are the original owners of America.
Thank you.
Black people, African Americans. They don't come from Africa. They were already here, and they plagued them out. And they stole the Smithsonian Institute, which is Jesuit controlled, stole their knowledge, stole their history, and now we're just left wondering who we are, where we are, where we come from, where we're going. We don't know.
Glad he said that.
Anything.
Wow.
Because that's what y'all wanted to see.
Because they did a catastrophe on this earth just only a few hundred years ago.
And they capitalized on the carnage. Do you understand? All of these buildings all around here, as I told in class last night, they're ours. They belong to us. They're ancient, these buildings. There's a whole city underneath this city. They've been burned all the major cities, the major energy centers on this globe we called an earth. Our ancestors set up these energy centers that we call Philadelphia, New York, Boston, Atlanta, Detroit, right? Chicago, Miami, Phoenix, Los Angeles. They are energy centers. They're not where they are in huge, large cities just because of some coincidence. There's energy and power in these places. London, Rio de Janeiro, all right? And by the way, we're going to spell it like this, Rio de, which is a normal title of the Moors, Rio de Janeiro. You understand? This thing is worldwide. This flag that we carry with the red flag, with the five-pointed green star, with the pointing up, all right, is a worldwide flag. It's recognized all around the world, all right?
The first slavery was white slavery.
Talk about that.
White folks sold their people to the Moors the moment they saw Moors coming.
And that is the white slave trade. Slave comes from Slav. And the reason why the word slave comes from Slav is that the first slaves are white.
The original slaves were European. The word slave comes from the word Slav, which you guys think of Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, right? Because of the amount of slaves that came from that region, that came from the region of the Europeans. The original slaves were European.
The first slavery was white slavery.
The original slaves were European. The original slaves were European.
The first slavery was white slavery.
The original slaves were European.
There's a region called the Riva degli Schiavoni.
Riva degli Schiavoni?
Yes. Can you tell
sure.
me the origin of that group?
I had that in my notes, but I couldn't read. Yeah, listen, when I was going to school, and it was Italian elementary school in my hometown, there was nothing else. I remember so vividly. I came home one day and I told my dad that I wanted to join the little fascist kids organization, you know, uniforms, toy guns, singing, marching, other privileges. You know. My father didn't say a word. Bailed, and next morning he took me across the border from Italy to Yugoslavia. And the school there was Croatian. But in my hometown, even some kids that grew together, they would call me Ščavo. That was the usual term for Slav. Now in the dialect, Ščavo means slave. Okay? Now never mind on the Croatian side when I was in school coming from Italy, they called me Italianac, which means that they're Italian. But the Riva degli Schiavoni, all right, Venice in the Middle Ages used to be one of the largest slave market in Europe. And most of the slaves, all right, were coming from the Eastern Slavic countries. So the Venetians that were involved very much in transportation, their ships and so on, along the pier, all right, they called it Riva degli Schiavoni because they were unloading slaves there.
So is that the origin of the word
Yeah.
slave?
Yeah.
Wow.
See, that's part of that misinformation in a way, all right? Where people, you know, I hear some scholars, all right, claiming that the origin of the name Slav, all right, is the term slave. The schiavo is a regular Italian term for slave. In a dialect, it becomes chavo, scalvo, and so on. So, what can I tell you?
Why did they put the O and A on it? Why did they put the O and E on it?
Oh, scavoni.
Yeah.
Well, that's a plural, all right? Plural. Just like I said before, scavo, that's a singular masculine. Plural is scavi.
But scalvi, now that would be the plural scalvoni. I wonder if that has a derogatory aspect. Like in Spanish, you say hombre is a man, hombron is a bad old man.
Yeah, but also see the region, which is today the region in Croatia, right, of Slavonia. Now the Italians, all right, and the Latins called it Sclavonia. Right? That's where Venetia got the best oak in the world that they use for building. You know, Venice is built on wood, and that's oak that petrifies in water.
Tonight we have as a guest Michael Hoffman II, an author of 4 books, numerous newsletters. He's also a researcher. Mike Hoffman, you have written a controversial book about they were white and they were slaves. How did you come to write this book?
Well, originally I came across a book on white servitude in Virginia by a man named J.C. Bala, and I became very intrigued by his idea that white servitude was not limited to this juvenile kind of sophomoric notion that's pushed in high school, that persons of white background who were put into so-called indentured servitude had a very privileged type of bondage, and that that bondage was very temporary, and then it was ended after a period of 4 or 7 years, and they re-entered the ruling class and went about the job of exploiting black people. J.C. Bala, it's a very thin book of about 100 pages, I believe, raised the point that there were some aspects of white servitude that were consonant with slavery. There were some aspects of white servitude that were consonant with slavery.